we head out to the fan hotline. She joins us every single Wednesday. I always got to make it Wednesday. Wednesday at 3:20, Ashley Bastock joins us now. Ashley, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. Ready to talk some kicker, and I guess we'll see what else we have time for today, right?
I mean, I am all about kicker being the biggest problem that you have, just not when it's this bad of a problem. Do you question the Browns' faith in Andre Schmidt?
Well, I question the whole not bringing anyone else in to even work out yesterday. So, yeah, I do question their faith in him. I don't understand why he has a long enough leash to go into week 2, a road game in the division, when obviously there's all this extra other stuff hanging around this matchup with the 30-year anniversary celebration the Ravens are doing. That's another whole topic of discussion. But yeah, I'm kind of shocked by this decision when he misses 2 easy kicks like that. We know so much of kicking is mental. Other teams worked out kickers yesterday. I do not understand why the Cleveland Browns were not one of them. And look, I think even if they want to keep Andre Schmidt around, if they're not ready to cut him and totally give up on him, I don't see why you just can't still bring other people in, get a look at them, possibly keep him on the practice squad. So yeah, it was a move, I think, over these last 48 or so hours that I'm fairly puzzled by.
Yeah, I like that approach. The sad part about this, though, is that if they did that, and again, I think it's the right idea, like bring somebody in, have a competition, by all accounts, all he ever did was make kicks in practice. It just, they never really saw him do what he did on Sunday yet.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair, but I think it would be more so for me, like, again, if you want to keep Andre Schmidt around, more so about just having an insurance policy at the ready. Like, ironically, that's kind of what they did last year when they brought Andre Schmidt in here late in the year, I think in December, when Dustin Hopkins was really struggling, right? But look, for me, I've been talking about this since the game ended. Like, it just kind of goes to show you how I think they've bungled this position a little bit going back to 2023 when they extended Dustin Hopkins. Look, Dustin had an amazing season that year. Obviously, he kicked really well. He was perfect on 50-yard plus field goals that season. But here's the thing people might not remember. The fact he was already under contract for 2024. They did not need to extend him. So in theory, in a world where they didn't, maybe they do decide to just let him move on instead of seeing if he could work some things out in training camp. And then maybe in this year's training camp, they would have had Andre Schmidt and somebody else, like 2 new legs that they could look at and really battle it out. So, yeah, it's a tough position to be in, but for me, it's also one they kind of put themselves in because I think maybe in hindsight now we can look at it and say, okay, they overreacted to what was a career best year from Dustin Hopkins, and now they are where they are. Ashley
Bastock, Cleveland.com on the fan hotline. Ashley, I had something to say about the Ravens' 30-year celebration in Baltimore this weekend ahead of the Browns game. Pretty much every guy on the station had something to say. I know Mary Kay wrote a great piece on this. We already played Joe Flacco and his response to this. You were in the Browns locker room today. Was there any kind of outrage from any of the players at this?
You know, they weren't really outwardly showing us much, but that doesn't surprise me. I think they never want to really hand out bulletin board material. And if you think about it, they've been handled some pretty great bulletin board material by this whole 30-year celebration occurring this week. And I think a lot of times they do like to keep that in-house, and they don't want to flip that and suddenly be talking a lot of trash in the lead-up to the game, and now you've given the Ravens some bulletin board material. So I think it's understandable we didn't hear about it. The interesting thing I thought was when we would ask players about it, no one said, oh, no, this is the first time I'm hearing about it, or, oh, no, I didn't know that was happening until you just said that. So I do think they knew already, which I think means there was maybe a mini history lesson happening this week in Berea for some of these players. And I mean, it is crazy to think about most of this Browns roster wasn't even alive when the team moved to Baltimore. So I hope they do milk this for every ounce that they can get out of it in terms of motivation and especially when it comes to players defending the fan base.
Maybe a little bulletin board material that we did get, Ashley, was the idea that Jerry Jeudy says the Ravens secondary presents just no problems for the Browns. I thought that was it's quite the bold claim from Jerry.
Yeah, you know what, though? I think in real time that quote necessarily didn't hit me as bulletin board material. I think it's just kind of the way Jerry talks. Like, I didn't really even give it a second thought in the moment. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. I mean, look, in the NFL, people use what they're going to use. I thought Denzel Ward even had a little bit of that happen to him last week. Jamar Chase seemed to take a little bit of issue of Denzel joking about texting Joe Burrow and telling him to give him more targets. But sometimes I think when these guys are friends or it's just the way they talk, it's not meant with that sort of trash-talking attitude. But as I said, players will take anything they can to turn something into bulletin board material, even if there's nothing real to go off of. So I didn't really, have an issue with what Jerry said. I think it was just part of an answer, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's just kind of how Jerry Tootie talks.
Ashley, the Browns were credited with 16 points. They could have scored as many as 20 points if Schmidt has made his kicks on Sunday. And there were some goods, there were some bads, but now you've got maybe a better defense. Do you expect the Browns to take the offense to take a step forward this weekend?
Well, I think the big question here is what's going to happen in their run game. Obviously, as a team last week, they couldn't even get 50 yards. They struggled to get anything going. Now, I thought Dylan Sampson played great. Most of his damage, though, was technically in the pass game. So are they going to have Quinshon Judkins back? That is the big question. He was not at practice today because he was meeting with the league. He is expected to practice tomorrow. So if he can practice tomorrow, if he can practice Friday, if he can go through walkthrough Saturday, if no discipline comes down from the league, and if he plays, I am really curious to see if that is going to help them take a step forward, because I think getting him back in that run game, this is the guy they've talked about being their bell cow back. They've compared him to Nick Chubb ever since they drafted him. It would have been, I think, more surprising if the run game looked extremely functioning without him, right? Like, we kind of expected things to not quite be there in week one without him. So I think whether he is going to play in this game will kind of determine that, because look, this is obviously a tough defensive front in terms of stopping that run. So without that key bell cow back, I do kind of still would be worried about the Browns. And in the same way that they performed against the Bengals, I would kind of expect a repeat performance of that.
Taking on Lamar is obviously never easy, but is Sunday almost like a defining game for how we view the defense this season?
I am always hesitant to use like the big terms this early in the season, whether it's like a must win or defining game, though, is interesting. That's a little different than must win. I think potentially people could come away feeling really, really good about this defense if they are able to contain Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. The Derrick Henry part of it is interesting because he's never had one game in his career where he just kills this Browns defense, going back to when he was with Tennessee. But I do think the Lamar challenge of it all is going to be huge for the rookies in particular. So I do think in that way it could help fans define how they feel about this defense and maybe think if it's a good performance, okay, they're the real deal. Like Carson Schlesinger is the real deal. If Mason Graham holds up, that'll be key. So I do think it has some potential in that regard to show that these guys are out there working really well as a cohesive unit.
So I know that we got the news earlier today that Quinshon Judkins wasn't with the team today. He's in New York meeting with the NFL under its personal conduct policy regarding his battery charge way back in August. I'm curious, though, given that he hypothetically could play this Sunday, how likely does it feel that he will play? And if so, how much do we expect the Browns to utilize him in his debut?
That's a good question. I feel like if he is out here practicing tomorrow, to me, that really turns the tide, and I feel like it is more likely than not that we would see him play. I do think my gut tells me, like, with running backs, it's just different. I think with him, the biggest thing is going to be making sure he's got everything down in terms of his pass protection. And obviously he was here in the spring and they started to work on all that stuff with him. He's familiar with a lot of these concepts from his time in college. So I think that's going to help. Like, I think if he's in good shape and he's out there and he looks good in practice, it wouldn't really be necessary to put him on a pitch count. Like, I think you would have him as your primary back and use Dylan Sampson on third downs if you want. Work Jerome Ford in there a little bit if you have to. But I think there probably wouldn't be a need for a pitch count in that sort of situation. But again, this is me speculating. I think it's something we'll have to wait and see how he actually comes out of a couple days of practice, if in fact he does go both days over Thursday and Friday.
I know they try to flush a loss after 24 hours, and they just try to rid themselves of any emotion attached to it all. But did you get any vibe that even in a loss, the Browns kind of felt like this might have been a win?
I don't know if I would go that far, but what I will say about the vibe is it felt very different from 2024 to me, and I think that's key. I would think so many times back to last season, you would go into a locker room after a loss, and the defeat was just like palpable, right? The bad attitudes were palpable. Like, you could feel those things, and you're just like, oh, geez, this is a team that is not winning a lot of football games. What I felt after Sunday was a team that was mad that they had lost, and rightfully so, and I think that's good. But also, I think they're a team that recognized, like, they did some good things, especially that defense in the second half, but also recognize the mistakes and the things they need to fix, especially with, for the defense. The miscues they had on that first drive were things they brought up constantly, the lack of takeaways. And I think that's good. Like, that's the space you want to be in. You don't want to be content with how you performed in a loss, but I think they were taking the good with the bad, and they weren't like totally deflated after that loss. So I think that's good in terms of not flushing it and being able to move on and not dwelling on all of the bad from that one.
Ashley, I think when we got into a conversation earlier about whether you're catching Baltimore at the wrong time, JP was focused on the fact that Baltimore's gotten tons of criticism for blowing that huge lead in the second half of the Sunday night game, where I looked at it and I'm like, they got a pretty strong schedule after they play the Browns. I'd be surprised if they thought about the Browns at all, and if this wasn't just a perfunctory thing they had to do, play on Sunday before they could move on to Detroit on Sunday night or Monday Night Football and then the Chiefs after that. Do you think that the Browns are catching the Ravens at the wrong time?
That's a great question. I think, like, on their own schedule, it's not ideal, right? These first 6 games are so tough, but what I will say is in these division games, anything can happen. I think that thought about this game, like, is it possible the Ravens are looking past the Browns? I certainly think that's a possibility. I know the Browns feel disrespected by the fact that they're double-digit underdogs. That rarely happens in the NFL. Games are so close. Vegas typically makes them within a score. So that part of it, I think they're dealing with. This 30th anniversary celebration they have, the Joe Flacco returning to Baltimore for the first time in his career since they moved on from him is a certain X factor. Like, weird things happen between these teams, and the Browns certainly have a lot of external motivation things right now. Like, if you're looking for something to convince yourself of why this team could beat Baltimore, if you were like me sitting there on Sunday night watching that Ravens offense thinking, oh my gosh, how are the Browns going to contend with this next week? I think those are all things you should focus on, because look, they weren't supposed to beat the Ravens last year in that game, and suddenly Baltimore was one of the 3 wins they got. Like, stranger things have happened. I think there is a realistic possibility that we could be sitting here after this Week 2 game and saying, oh, maybe the Ravens caught the Browns at a bad time for them. Like, anything can happen in this division. It's just weird.
That's a spin right there.
We like it, though.
It is a spin, right? It's a positivity spin.
That's where we're at there. Ashley, great stuff. We appreciate you. We'll talk to you next Wednesday.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Ashley Bastock there, Cleveland.com on the Fan Hotline.